The last caution that Carl Jung issued to empaths was chilling. They're consuming your light without your knowledge or consent. Jung was hesitant to reveal the private notes he had taken on a psychological phenomenon because of how unpleasant they were. What I refer to as unconscious energy parasites were methodically draining empaths, or persons with exceptional emotional sensitivity, as he noticed. These creatures didn't seem like they would be good prey. They appeared to be in dire need of mending, but they were frequently endearing, wounded individuals. In a disturbing development, though, Jung found that these people had unknowingly adapted to surviving by absorbing the spiritual energy of others, especially the most luminous empaths. What was most terrifying? There is no way to see the feeding procedure. It takes the weaponization of an empath's naturally sympathetic nature. Trauma ties passed off as profound love, and emotional manipulation posing as connection. Jung came to the realization that empaths weren't only drawn to troublesome individuals by chance. Rather, they were pursued by those whose inner light had been snuffed out and who could only stay alive by swallowing the light of others. Come with me as we explore the depths of the human mind in search of these unseen dangers. Discover Jung's band method for going from prey to sovereign without losing your amazing ability, and learn to spot their feeding mechanisms before they strike. Approach it with an evolutionary mindset. As a way to stay alive, empaths hone their heightened sensitivity to the supernatural. Children who were able to decode facial expressions, sense when people's moods would change, and understand the meaning of nonverbal cues fared better in homes where tensions ran high. For the simple reason that current psychology continues to deny what Jung found, empaths do not come into this world damaged. Their vulnerability to emotional parasites is shaped by the trauma they experienced as children. According to Jung, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. However, in his clinical work, he uncovered a darker truth. When an empath meets an energy parasite, only one person undergoes transformation, and it's actually never the parasite. However, some individuals have figured out how to take advantage of this neurological difference. This is something that Jung saw, but most therapists fail to see. They deliberately tap into your empathy rather than merely inadvertently doing so. Unbeknownst to them, they are experts at energy extraction passed off as intimacy, trauma bonding as profound love, and emotional manipulation as connection. The cruel irony, though, is that adult predators have learned to use your gift as a weapon, and the very mechanism that protected you as a youngster is now turning you into a walking advertisement for them. Empaths' mirror neurons fire at a higher rate than the ordinary person's, according to Dr. Judith Olaf's research, which backs up Jung's observation. Your mind takes up the feelings of other people and stores them as its own. The worst aspect, though, is not yet revealed. Put this in the comments if you've ever felt totally depleted after being with some people and couldn't put your finger on why. They were feeding on my light. The worst component? This reversal of shadow projection is what Jung referred to as, in addition to stealing your light, the energy parasite will try to convince you that sharing it is your life's true calling. Jung noted this pattern on multiple occasions. According to his writing, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. However, when it comes to empaths and energy parasites, the situation is actually the mirror opposite. Parasites often project their own feelings of emptiness onto empaths, leading them to believe that these states are natural, that depletion is a sign of commitment, and that love is at its core. Imagine a period when spending time with someone totally depleted your energy. If you experienced abrupt exhaustion, emotional overload, muscle strain, or mental fog, your body was likely trying to tell you something. But I bet you convinced yourself you were being overly sensitive or overthinking instead of just listening. Here we can see the feeding process in action, and the exactitude of Jung's observations becomes horrifying at this point. You must believe this in order to be possessed by the energy parasite. The phenomenon that Carl Jung referred to as gaslighting of the unconscious occurs when an individual's shadow attempts to trick your awareness into thinking that your intuition is at fault. Phase 1. Light recognition technology. Like moths to a flame, energy parasites unconsciously gravitate toward empaths. No matter how far away you are, they can feel your emotional availability. According to Jung, narcissistic people can tell empaths from the get-go. They can see the light emanating from someone who is selfless, sensitive, and takes emotional responsibility for the well-being of others. Second stage, wound presentation. The parasite doesn't come out demanding anything. They come hurting closer. Their deep emotions, trauma, and challenges are shared. In doing so, they reflect your depth while masking their own hollowness. According to Jung, The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. However, energy parasites have mastered the art of becoming someone you desire them to be. Systematic extraction begins once they've piqued your compassion. They cause a chain reaction of problems, making you put in a lot of mental effort. They take it out on others without caring. When no one else gets them, they make you feel unique. Empaths, according to Jung, confuse neediness with love. Step 3. Activating empathy. Fourth step, depletion normalization. At this point, it becomes really sinister. Parasites trick their hosts into thinking that exhaustion is evidence of a strong bond. Love is akin to weariness, that you're extremely sensitive, not systematically drained due to your emotional overwhelm. Jung didn't perceive this as merely interpersonal dysfunction, and this is where his understanding becomes groundbreaking. My term for it is the wounded healer meets the shadow devourer, and he saw it as a pattern. According to Jung, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. This means that empaths must come to terms with the fact that their compassion can be used as a weapon, that their gift can also be their prison, and that their light might be extinguished if they don't figure out how to maintain it. Every archetype in Jungian psychology has a corresponding shadow. The shadow side of an empath isn't viciousness. It's the unconscious desire to be needed, the fixation on helping other people because it's safer than being noticed, and the extreme fear of being alone that leads some to embrace energy vampirism. Energy parasites aren't inherently bad. What Jung referred to as the shadow's hunger for wholeness is what propels these unconscious beings. Sincere emotion, real connection, and profound emotional depth are qualities they have banished from themselves, yet they detect them in you. However, they have learned to take these traits from other people rather than reclaiming them through inner labor. Because they no longer have access to their own energy, they subsist on yours. They have put out their own fire and are now basking in your light. The more you offer them energy, the more they demand. Your efforts to cure them only make them more wounded, and the more light you shed, the black their shade becomes. This is what I call the psychological vampire effect. Their psychological incompleteness is to blame, not their intrinsic evilness. Ever since they denied they could feel real emotions, they've been relying on other people to make them feel good. The insatiable hunger of a person who lacks a digestive system. You can sense their anguish, their loneliness, and their intense desire for your light. This is the impossible decision that empaths face. In your heart, you long to be a savior, a healer, and a helper. But Jung made a groundbreaking discovery that alters the course of events. Letting someone feed on your essence will not help them heal. If you let someone drain your light, you won't be able to love them whole again. Here are a few examples of how this pattern manifests. Someone who is subconsciously determined to be lost cannot be saved. The energy vampire of romance. The one who eats family energy. A spiritual retreat was the setting for Sarah and David's meeting. He evoked her innate capacity for healing by appearing profoundly sensitive and hurt. Tragic events from his youth, his battles with depression, and his quest for purpose were all topics he discussed. Being the only one who could relate to him made Sarah feel special and chosen. Sarah didn't realize she was always tired until a few months had passed. During her work hours, David would call and rant about his mental problems and trauma for hours on end, never once asking how she was doing. No matter how much she tried to talk about her problems, he would downplay them or turn them into an excuse for his own suffering. Sarah saw that David wasn't looking for healing, but rather provision. After using Jung's concepts, he had developed an addiction to her empathy and relied on her emotional work. Her imposition of limits caused David's mask to fall. She wasn't the person he imagined her to be, he said. She was cold and heartless. The emotional intensity of Michael's mother had never wavered. She would repeatedly contact him with dire situations, causing him to worry about her welfare. She would accuse him of betraying her if he did not respond right away. The moment he attempted to establish limits, she would make suicidal threats. This is what Jung calls the eating mother archetype, a parent who, without realizing it, devours their child's vitality rather than nourishing it. From a young age on, Michael had his empathy used against him. After researching energy parasitism, he understood that his tiredness had nothing to do with being a terrible kid and everything to do with being methodically depleted by a woman who had never mastered self-control. It was a betrayal to establish limits with his mother, but he had to in order to protect himself. The energy vampire in the workplace. One of Lisa's coworkers was a disaster waiting to happen. This individual caused chaos in team meetings by bringing up irrelevant issues. They sought out Lisa for long therapy sessions, and they made everyone else's problems their own. The coworker made it even more sinister by portraying their actions as profoundly sensitive, casting themselves as the warm and fuzzy one in a chilly business setting. Because of her innate sensitivity, Lisa felt compelled to offer unending assistance. According to Jung, this is an example of projection. The coworker was unknowingly blaming others for their emotional dysregulation and trying to represent themselves as a victim of an emotionally distant society. The unseen threat. Allowing energy parasites to feed on your light causes you to integrate with their shadow, which is why Jung's warning becomes more relevant at this point. You begin to get into their narrative, which states that your purpose in life is to cater to the feelings of other people. According to Jung, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Your light isn't meant to be consumed by others. It is meant to illuminate your own path toward wholeness. This is something Jung discovered, and it will change your view of yourself forever. As an empath, you must realize that your need to mend comes from hurts that have not yet been fully healed. On the flip hand, empathy can lead to the subconscious conviction that you are unworthy of love unless you are helpful, that your worth is determined by how much suffering you endure for the sake of others. You are an ideal host for energy parasites due to your thought system. You drain yourself of your resources, justifying it as spiritual growth. You commit emotional labor without end, thinking it's love, and you sacrifice your health and happiness, justifying it as service. Giving all you have to other people all the time isn't love. It's running away from the difficult task of loving yourself. In order to avoid facing your own pain head-on, it's common to fixate on helping other people. In spiritual bypassing, the energy parasite plays the role of a facilitator by creating never-ending drama to distract you from facing your shadow, by offering to save someone else so that you don't have to save yourself, and by making you play the martyr instead of asserting your sovereignty. Here is Jung's model, which I refer to as the light method, for guarding your light without becoming heartless. Energy signatures can be identified. It was feeling-toned complexes that Jung stressed. If you are sensitive enough, your empathic abilities can pick up on the unique energetic signature that each individual possesses. For parasites, it's a whole new ballgame. Exhausted, nervous, bewildered, emotionally hijacked. When they're healthy, people feel energized, focused, calm, and motivated. Keep track of your emotions before, during, and after each encounter. Your body is like a high-tech radar. Pay attention to its signals. I bring your shadow into reality. Integrating in the shadows is crucial. Recognize and accept the aspects of yourself that feel lonely, anxious, or like love is something you have to earn. Pose the question, what am I gaining by being required by sad people? How can I put off my own healing in order to save other people? The point isn't to get rid of these habits entirely, but to become aware of them so that they don't subconsciously dictate how you interact with others. Protect the divine energy within you. Taking care of your energies is a spiritual obligation. Refuse to do emotional work that drains you. Refrain from taking on the unresolved feelings of other people. Pick connections that bring you joy instead of sadness. Remember that your energy is precious and limited. Stay true to who you are. Feel confident in your intuition's insight. Embrace your sensitivity as a strength, and make deliberate use of your gifts instead of letting them slip your mind. Individualization, according to Jung, is about letting go of the impulse to conform to other people and embracing one's own identity. Turn adversity into insight. To quote Jung, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. This means coming to terms with the fact that you are not weak but rather carry something valuable, which is why you have been targeted. Your innate capacity for empathy served you well in times of crisis, but now it needs to blossom into a deliberate source of power. To empathize with people without taking their feelings on board. To be compassionate without letting your own needs be compromised. To lend a hand without draining your own resources. The pattern changes when you implement Jung's principles. You draw in self-aware entities who are able to match your depth without draining you. Be cautious, though, because energy parasites will feed more aggressively if they feel your limits tightening. To coerce you into obedience, they will instigate worse problems, make suicidal threats, and accuse you of being unfeeling or self-centered. In a last-ditch effort to preserve their supply, this is Jung's extinction flare of darkness. On the contrary, it shows that your boundaries are having the desired effect. Remain resolute. Their escalation reflects their addiction, not your value. It is not your job to control how they feel. Being around considerate, self-aware individuals will help you develop and respect your boundaries. First and foremost, you need to change into the character you wish to attract. Becoming self-aware is the first step toward having meaningful interactions with other people. To cultivate relationships in which you are both given and received, You must master the art of receiving. Showing up as yourself rather than acting out is the only way to attract genuine love. To Jung, the crux of the matter is that you are fighting a spiritual war for control of your own awareness. He pointed out, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. However, energy parasites are in it to keep you weak, exhausted, and unaware of your strength. When you start to guard your energy and establish limits, you're not only altering your relationships, you're fighting for your own soul, your own being, your luminosity, your very essence is at jeopardy. Remorse. I thought you were more compassionate. After everything I've shared, you'll abandon me, is the guilt trip they'll deploy. Anxiety. You're selfish and you'll end up alone. Threats to one's identity. This isn't who you really are. However, the supreme weapon, consciousness, was bestowed upon us by Jung. Their manipulation becomes less effective once you recognize it for what it is. Refusing energy vampires is a vote of confidence in your own personal growth. With each barrier you establish, you are casting a vote for the genuine you. I need you right now, a false sense of urgency. Any interpersonal dynamic predicated on inequality is jeopardized by an awakened empath who is immune to manipulation, drain, and control. As a boundary, you make other people take stock of their own feelings and behaviors by reflecting their unconscious patterns back to them. Refusing to dull your light for the sake of another person's comfort is a choice between spiritual stagnation and advancement. Being discerning does not imply being icy or heartless. Rather, it implies being selective. True compassion and codependency are defined for you. The key to helping others without causing oneself harm is something you learn. And this is Jung's last game-changing insight. Systems based on unconsciousness are vulnerable to empaths once they awaken to their own power. Rather than merely guarding their own light, the awakened empath becomes a guiding light for everyone around them. You transform from a source of others' misery into a force that helps them overcome it. However, being willing to be disliked by unconscious people is a terrible prospect for most empaths, and this transition necessitates it. Being ready to let go of relationships that have been based on exhaustion, belief in standing on your own 2 feet instead than compromising for superficial relationships. He said, the meeting of 2 personalities is like the contact of 2 chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. Being an awakened empath means you can only stay in relationships with people who are equally dedicated to developing themselves. The rest will eventually fade away. Rather than loss, this is emancipation. Sovereignty, not loneliness, describes this. This is an example of discernment, not failure. True energetic sovereignty can be achieved by becoming aware of one's current level of development along the 3 tiers of empathic maturity that Jung identified. Leave a comment if you've ever been accused of being selfish for establishing limits with people who drain your energy. A word of caution, your energy is priceless. You'll realize that a single genuine connection is better than 100 toxic ones. You'll come to understand that being there is more important than having a large group of people around. The value of your light cannot be squandered by others who are unwilling to engage in personal introspection, as you will come to realize. First level, the unwitting empath. Everything is experienced, but nothing is understood by you. Unconsciously, you take on the feelings of those around you. You blame your oversensitivity for your chronic exhaustion. Without knowing how to safeguard your talents, you open yourself up to energy parasites. Like a radio that can pick up all frequencies but can't tune into any particular channel. Your empathy controls you instead of the other way around. The conscious empath, level 2. You start to make deliberate use of your powers after you become aware of them. Feeling the feelings of other people does not mean you have to internalize them. You are now able to set and keep certain boundaries, thanks to your newfound knowledge of energy protection measures. Empathy and codependency are 2 different things, but you still have a hard time letting go of shame and breaking old habits. Level 3. The aristocratic empath. You've accepted your shadow self and are now free to use your gifts as strengths in your spiritual journey, not weaknesses. When you feel anything, you hold on to it. Conscious, mutually beneficial interactions gravitate toward you. No longer will your empathy be a weapon for exploitation, but for discernment. You are able to discern authentic feelings from staged ones, and you can provide healing without sacrificing your own energy. Moving from level 1 to level 3 necessitates the bravery to let people down. Society expects empaths to be constantly accessible to help people heal, and you must be prepared to disappoint energy parasites, your family and yourself, if you want to live your life to the fullest. Finally, Jung warns that if you start guarding your light, Unconscious empathy is permanently lost. The patterns of food consumption are visible. There is no going back to emotional servitude. Relationships will suffer, your sense of self will be tested, and you will have to face aspects of yourself that prefer to be needed than appreciated, useful than genuine, and exhausted than lonely as a result of this awareness. Some will see this as an excuse to put up barriers instead of walls, to stop believing in the power of human connection, and start treating energy exchange with suspicion. Spiritual strength will be mistaken for emotional unavailability. Stay away from that error. The point isn't to become emotionally distant or uncaring. Rather, it's to be thoughtful and deliberate in your emotional responses. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Nevertheless, in order to become one's authentic self, one must let go of the person they believe they should be in order to appease others, according to Jung's last caution. You should not see your light as something to be devoured, but rather as a presence to be lived in. Additional exhausted healers are unnecessary. It calls for empaths who have experienced awakening and can discern between enabling and loving, compassion and codependency, and selflessness and service. Rather than being a service, your empathy is a gift that should be freely shared. Keep in mind Jung's horrifying revelation. The energy parasites he recorded weren't monsters, but rather unconscious beings who adapted to live by absorbing the light of others instead of setting fire to themselves. Add, they sensed my awakening before I announced it. If you saw a change in how people treated you once you stopped being their emotional dumping ground. In his concluding notes, Jung wrote, "The greatest and most important problems of life are all fundamentally insoluble. They can never be solved, only outgrown. Attempting to cure energy parasites will not eliminate them. The need to be needed by other people is something you may grow out of. Learning to control one's gifts doesn't make an awakened empath less empathetic. Rather, it makes them more selective. They figure out how to share their light with those who can hold it without stealing it, who can admire it without consuming it, and who can match it without bringing it down." What Jung realized that changed everything is that protecting your light doesn't make it go out, it makes it stronger. You will have more energy for your own development, healing, and progress when you quit giving it to other people. Instead of being subconsciously compelled to give away your gifts, Jung's last caution was about claiming your inheritance as a conscious creature who decides how to use them. This warning was about more than just defending yourself from energy parasites. You should not be ashamed of your empathy, consciously using it as a strength. You don't have to struggle to control your sensitivity. When mastered, it becomes a superpower. The most effective defense is not physical barriers that keep people out, but rather an open mind that allows love to enter. When you get the hang of this difference, you'll never again mistake being loved with being drained, needed for treasured, or depleted for committed. You are not a source of fuel for the darkness of others. Rather, you are a source of light that guides you toward wholeness. Unconscious empaths are the only hosts for the energy parasites Jung forewarned about. You can become immune to their feeding processes when you reawaken to your true identity, learn to protect your essence, and consciously offer your gifts. They're feeding on your light, Jung said emphatically, and his assurance, make no mistake, you can put a stop to them. You are not alone if you identify with this caution. The power is being reclaimed by thousands of empaths as they become aware of these patterns. Tell us in the comments, are you prepared to establish a boundary to safeguard your light? It is possible that your tale may motivate another empath to take the first step toward achieving energetic autonomy. If you're interested in learning more about Jung's psychology and how it relates to contemporary relationships, I recommend watching my video, Why You Have No Motivation Left After Facing Your Shadow. In it, I explain how confronting your shadow can sap your motivation and ambition. Much obliged for your time. Until we meet again in another realm.